Welcome to our Tuesday Talk. I'm Michael Robinson, the career coach here at Easter Seals Veteran Staffing Network, VSN for short. I'll be your host and presenter. In this session, we're going to be discussing how to reinvent your career. But before we talk about that, I'd like to take a moment to cover some housekeeping items. This webinar will last approximately 45 minutes with a live 15-minute Q&A session at the end. If you have any questions before then, please pop those into the chat. I'll break periodically to address them to see if anything's being chatted that I need to address. And lastly, let us know how we're doing by filling out the end of session survey. Here's a little bit about me. I am a retired Marine with a majority of my post-military career having been in HR. I've held positions as a hiring manager, recruiter, and career counselor. In my previous position, I worked exclusively with military members moving into the civilian workforce as an employment facilitator, part of the Transition Assistance Program. Many of you know this as TAP. During that time frame, I taught more than 100 workshops to over 2,000 transitioning service members. Now, please allow me to introduce the VSN to you. The VSN staff understands the employment challenges that veterans, military spouses face because we too are veterans and military spouses also. We've matched over 2,700 qualified candidates with employers to fill temporary to permanent, contract, and direct hire positions. The fees from those placements are then reinvested into the coaching services, which has allowed the VSN to have coached more than 15,000 veterans, wounded warriors, and military spouses. This leads me to where I fit in. Our career coaching program just isn't about helping people find a new job. It's about helping people discover what they need in work to be truly happy and find how they can contribute meaningfully so that hopefully they will not be looking for work for a very, very long time. Our process is to help people gain clarity on their career by understanding the core aspects of the employment process, what you see here on the slide. Then they can take control of their career and their job search. Today, we're talking about the career reinvention, and our session today will cover these items. We are going to talk about what a career reinvention is, the 6 stages that are involved, common obstacles, and then best practices. And if you happen to see this icon, the YouTube icon, all it means is that we have a Tuesday talk that specifically addresses the topic that I'm on at that point. Moving to what a career reinvention is. Interesting enough, there actually isn't a standard definition for what a career change is, believe it or not. The Department of Labor has not defined it because many people see that a job change is the same as a career change. And let's put it in a little bit more of a perspective. Maybe you're working at an organization, you've been there for a couple of years, and you are promoted to the next higher level, maybe into a supervisor or manager's position. Well, that can actually be considered a career change, not just a job change. And so others, many people see this as synonymous. And therefore, that's why it would be very, very difficult to put a definition to a career change when actually there's a lot of things that can constitute a career change. Keep that in mind. Others kind of define it as moving from one type of work to another. And this could be, maybe you are working as a customer service representative and now you are moving into the medical field, maybe as a certified nurse's aide, whatever that new move might entail. That could be considered a job change, career change, however you want to look at it. That's why this is difficult really to define. And there's also what we call a career pivot. And this is a slight change in our career path. We are still using our knowledge, skills, and abilities that we've learned in our previous career path and are just slightly moving to find something different. This is also known as a career shift also. And doing these in practical steps could actually lead you into a completely different career path. And then many of us have heard of what's called the career transition. And really all this is the time period between when you start and then you complete that transition. It could be a month, it could be 5 to 10 years. Really depends on how you go about doing this. That is what, in a nutshell, people kind of define a career change is. Many different definitions there. What is a career reinvention? This can really be encompassing all those things, but really what it is it is actually a internal shift in your mindset. It is about reflecting your self-image, changing those negatives and turning those into positives. And whether that is the process of unlearning things that you have had in the past and relearning or upskilling your skills, your knowledge, skills, and abilities. And this can also help people discover what they truly need in their lives to be better and more fulfilled, to be the best version of themselves, so to speak. And then lastly, it allows you to continue learning and to be ready to adapt to the changes that are happening in the job market. As we've seen over the past year, 2 years, almost 3 years now, since COVID began, the job market has gone from one end of the spectrum to the other end of the spectrum, and is now starting to try to come to a certain balance here. The job market has been all over the place. But if you are in the middle of a career reinvention, this is probably a prime opportunity for you to develop those new skills and maybe quite possibly take on new job outlooks or opportunities. And this can take several forms, from making a radical career change. That means one day you're a mechanic and the next day or the next couple of years, you train to be maybe a therapist. You're moving in a very, very different direction than you were before. And many people during COVID discovered that what they were doing maybe wasn't the best for them considering the circumstances. And then once everything sort of happened, they reconsidered what their goals were, what their family situations might have been, and made that change for them, hopefully for the better. And they can also be finding a similar job in a new company, transitioning from one employer to another, a complete redesign of your current career. Maybe you decide, hey, I'm going to go back to school, I'm going to go get some certifications, whatever those things might be, really is really up to you. The last thing that most people, and some of the people that I've coached before, really never considered is actually starting their business. So if you're kind of stuck in, you just don't know quite what to do, but you've got these great ideas, well, that might be something for you also. And that could be a career reinvention. The idea of a career reinvention really is about taking yourself and developing new skills, abilities, and different outlooks, as well as your behaviors throughout an established career or one that you're looking to get into. So there's many different ways that you could look at this. There's no one set way. The thing is that we are developing good habits, successful habits that are going to lead us in the direction that we want to go. What are some signs that it's time for a career change? Well, believe it or not, if at Sunday night, you start feeling that queasy feeling in your stomach, thinking about going in or doing your job on Monday morning, then that could really be something to consider. Maybe it's really time for a change. If you've checked out, you're no longer interested in what you're doing, your future looks bleak. In other words, there's no potential opportunities that are currently in what you're doing. Maybe you're burnt out, and or you're jealous of others. You see others doing, something, and you say to yourself, well, I can do that. This is not something that's impossible for me to do. And you look at these other people and see what they have, and you're like, I want what they want or what they have. That's a good possibility that it's time for a change. Money matters. We all know that money is money, and we're going to need money in order to survive and do the things that we need to do. Money matters if it's you need more money, or maybe you are in a position that you can lessen your responsibilities and go after a position that is more passionate to you. And then if you're even thinking about switching careers, then it's a good possibility that it might be time for a change. Look at some statistics here. This survey was sent out and received more than 52,000 responses from people out of 44 different countries. This wasn't no small survey. This was pretty big. At the top of the list, money was the king, was the ruler. But let's think about it. Inflation has gone up. Things are a whole lot more expensive than they were, 2 or 3 years ago. Money quite possibly could be the driving force behind a lot of this. But also look at these other things. I want to find a job that's fulfilling, to where you can truly be yourself, or being accepted by those that are around you and your coworkers. There's a lot more, not only with the money, but actually feeling accepted in a environment that's going to be open to who you are. That's important. That's very important. Why would anyone want to reinvent their career? So maybe your philosophy and your goals have changed. As we get older, things change, and we are now maybe looking at different things than we were a few years ago. And then work flexibility, maybe pre-pandemic, everything was okay. After, the pandemic, maybe things aren't as well as they were. I know before the pandemic, childcare was fairly affordable for some, and now childcare is through the roof, and many people have to balance their current work and the childcare that they are not going to be able to afford to put their children into care. That is, where that work's flexibility really comes in. Salary, career satisfaction. What about if your loved ones are concerned? If they're telling you that you're not, sleeping well, or you're not eating like healthy things, and you're always constantly stressed out. The health-wise, that's not going to be a good thing. That might be the catalyst in order to make that change. One thing I'd like to introduce everyone to, and many of you may have heard of this, if not seen this before, but I'm going to put a different spin on this. And this is called the hierarchy of needs, or the theory of motivation. And what this is we have in life what we would need, and then we have work life. And comparing the two, at the bottom here is our basic survival needs, those things that we need: food, water, shelter, that are going to provide those basic needs. And the general theory behind this is that we will continue looking for these different stages until we finally get that. And once we get that, then we'll move on to the next stage. And that's not necessarily true for everyone, but just keep that in mind as I go through this. If we look at it from the work standpoint, if we don't have enough money for us to survive, to pay that rent, to get food, we're going to take whatever we can get, that survival job. If we are currently working full time, but we're not making enough because of the shift in the market, then we may have to take on a part-time job that pays minimum wage. We are literally trying to fulfill those physiological basic needs. From that point, we have the safety. And for life, in our personal lives, that is talking about our health, our property, buying a new house, whatever that might be, apartment, and our personal security. In work, What that equates to is being able to have a full-time job with benefits for healthcare, for all those other things that we need in order to keep ourselves safe. Then we have love and belonging. Desiring family and friends. Maybe we're looking to start a family, whatever it might be, we are looking to be accepted by a group of individuals. Thinking back to that survey, this is where we build networks and we desire to find a little bit more in our work. And then the esteem. Well, now what that means is we want to grow and we want to gain respect and recognition and a little bit of status. In the groups that we are currently involved in, whether that's home or our family, maybe we come from a big family or maybe we come from a large family, we still want to gain that respect. In work, this could be getting that recognition and aspiring to be more senior roles. Now, this doesn't work for everyone because, or this may not be everybody's outlook, because I have plenty of people that say, Michael, I'm just fine where I am. I don't want any more senior roles. I love what I do, and that's where I want to stay. Once we kind of realize what is best for us, we have actually reached what is called self-actualization. And this is the top of the pyramid, well, where we realize our full potential, our self-fulfillment, and this is the peak of our experiences. We don't want to do anything else anymore. And in work, again, this could be that climbing that senior ladder, you get to senior management, whatever it might be, or you're that individual that says, I'm happy where I'm at. I love what I'm doing, and I don't look forward to doing anything else. You have reached that self-actualization. That's the idea. In personal life, we have these needs that we need to have fulfilled, and we also have needs that we need to have fulfilled in our work life. Why doesn't everyone reinvent their careers? First of all, most people are afraid to. Believe it or not, fear of success is an actual fear that prevents people from moving forward. And what this could be is that person maybe has been successful in the past and they've had a negative experience. Maybe because of that experience, they were successful, they earned a lot of money, and maybe they ended up getting a divorce, and they tie that back to, well, if I'd have never did this, and I would never have gone to this particular position, then that would have never happened. That can be an actual fear why people don't do it. And then, of course, fear of failure. People are terrified to start over. Maybe they believe they're too old to, and believe me, you're never too old. You're never too old to do what you want to. It just really are those factors that are going to be there that are going to allow that to happen. Certain circumstances, I know, being a brain surgeon or a heart surgeon, they don't allow you to practice after 65, if I'm not mistaken, or at least enter into the field at 65. Those are few and far between, but generally speaking, you're never too old to do what you want to do. Scared of losing income. I mean, think about it. 9 times out of 10, if we move from one industry to another industry, well, we may have a significant reduction in our pay. Those are some things to keep in mind as we go through this. What do we do about fear? Here are some tips to overcome fear. And basically redefine that fear by writing it down. If you can write it down and take a look at it, sometimes you're able to create a way to mitigate that fear. Some people are, let's say, public speaking. Some people are afraid and terrified of public speaking. But if we don't actually go out and do it and we don't engage that fear, then we're always going to be afraid of that. Maybe the simple solution is to join a club or take classes, speech classes, a public speaking class. Maybe that is something enough to help. Toastmasters, maybe join Toastmasters to address that fear. But we have to engage it. And then, of course, remain focused in your current position if you are still employed. Many people, we've heard of this quiet quitting kind of thing. We don't want to do that because you'll be quietly fired. Believe me, there are employers that are in tune to this, and they're cracking down on that productivity process. Remain focused on your current position but plan and coordinate, and you'll hear me talk about this a little bit later, gradually make that move. And then, of course, research those opportunities and develop your skills. Those are going to be the ways that overcoming that fear of actually moving from one to the other by building your confidence there. Moving to the 6 stages of career reinvention. Stage 1, we're determined. We need to make a determination. Understand the difference between a job and a career. A job is what you're getting paid to do currently at this point. And jobs do lead to careers. Careers, well, that could be, again, this is not you can look this up online, and there's plenty of different ideas about what a career is. Really, it is the accumulation of long learning, skills and abilities, and the pursuit of occupations. That really is what a career is. You could have multiple career jobs that lead to a career in different paths, or you can spend 20, 30 years in one industry, in one company, et cetera, et cetera. Understand that jobs lead to careers, but your career is what you make it. Conciliate your emotions. Make sure that we have a good understanding of what we're going to do. We're well informed, and we have addressed those fears. Think about those practical considerations. We just don't want to jump from one industry to the next without doing that proper planning, our salary research. Make sure that we are doing informational interviews with people that are in that organization that we want to go to, or that are working in those industries. Here's the biggest: define what success is. In your mind, everybody's version of success is different. So there's no definition of what success actually is. You will be the one that defines that. And then, what does the path look like? By doing that planning and looking ahead, then you'll be able to have a better idea of what to expect in your next move. Stage 2 is about self-discovery. And there are a couple of things that you have to ask yourself. And I've done, by definition, what we've talked about. I did a career change and a career reinvention. My first career change was from the military entering to the civilian sector. And my second one was because I went from as a security manager, and then I transitioned into human resources. And you have to really figure out what is the best things what makes you the best, and what are you really like when you're at your best? What are your superpowers? And it took me a long time to figure things out. And one of those things, what I find to be my superpower is I relate to people very easily. And people have told me this, so it's not just me, thinking that this is what my superpower is, but it actually, people have told me this, and I get along with people very well from all walks of life. My wife tells me I know no stranger, because I can, go out on the street and pretty much strike up a conversation with almost anybody and have a good talk with them. That was my superpower, and it took me a while. It wasn't, that I had a hard skill, but the idea that I could relate to people very easily. And I like the employment realm. I mean, I look at this stuff, I read this stuff all the time, and I decided to combine the two. And that's kind of led me to where I'm at now. When you're looking at these things, and mind you, it took me about 10 years to do that. So not to scare anybody, but understand that a career reinvention can take a very, very long time. It's not something that's going to happen overnight. But all of this stuff, understanding what it's like to be at your best, what your superpower is, what others perceive your superpowers, and then being able to tell your story. What's your story? This is going to be so important, and we'll talk about that a little bit more here in the next segments. Stage 3 is that exploration. What can I do? This is really about discovering your talent. Now, talent is what you're naturally good at. If you are, naturally good at doing certain things, then that's going to be your talent. You don't have to think about it. You just go out there and do that. What's your passion? Your passion in this sense is what your interest is. Your talent and your passion don't necessarily they don't necessarily have to be in line, but if they are in line, it would be very, very beneficial for you. And oftentimes people have those skill sets, but their interest is completely different. And that's where that skills gap comes in, and they have to fill that gap at some point. And oftentimes where we have individuals that aren't a fit in a particular role is because their passion or their skills just don't align with that. How can you do that? These are your competencies. This is how your behaviors are and what you can do in that role. You can have all the skill in the world. However, if you don't behave appropriately in this skill, you don't use it and apply it effectively, then you don't have those competencies. What environment do you want to do this in? This is going back to that survey that we looked at earlier. How's that culture of that organization going to apply? What culture would you like to work in? Those are the things that are going to be more important questions to ask. And then who can help me with your network, excuse me. And then when can you do that? That's completely up to you in your action planning. And again, mine took about 10 years. For most, it might take a year. I mean, it really depends. It really depends on what you have going on and how far in that planning did you go in order to get to where you want to go. Then we come to step 4. This is about experimenting. And those that believe that they can just take and move into a different career field without exploring it, that could be a mistake. You really, really would want to get a taste of what you're getting into, if at all possible. And there are a few things, on-the-job training programs, which are really, really good. You may pick up a side hustle doing some freelance work. There's a lot of people that do that. And then understand if you're currently going to school, you have internships and externships. Internships, they can be paid or unpaid and last anywhere from 3 months to 12, up to a year. Externships, well, that's just job shadowing and it's unpaid, and you will usually last a day to a week. Apprenticeships, I tell people and I tout about apprenticeships all the time, and it's just not for the traditional, what people consider a standard apprenticeship might be, barbershop, being an electrician. There are apprenticeships in finance and banking. There's apprenticeships in cybersecurity and engineering. There's a lot of different apprenticeships, but most people don't explore these because they don't understand what these are. And if you are interested in what I'm saying and what I'm talking about, please feel free to contact me and we can explore in these apprenticeship programs. Volunteer, I tout this all the time. Volunteer work could quite possibly be that catalyst that moves you into your next career as well. Part-time work, and then of course, school and or community activities. But you want to take and experiment a little bit, get as much experiments as you can in order to gain a little bit more awareness about where that next career might end up for you. And then stage 5, conditioning. What do I mean by this? Conditioning. Well, you have to mentally, financially, and physically prepare for that next move. And what this really means is mentally and emotionally, there may be a sense of guilt for leaving. If you've been with an organization for a long, long time, and maybe you've built up some real, work relationships with people, well, you might feel guilty about leaving. Many people in the military have this problem because they feel that, once they leave, then the organization that they're in is going to fall apart. And that's simply not true. But it is a very real feeling. Adjusting your personality. More times than not, most people, their identity is tied to their occupation. Lawyers, doctors, military people, officers and enlisted, senior enlisted. It really is about letting go of old patterns and habits and even old identities and changing it into something new. The financial preparation, well, that is tracking your monthly expenses, paying down debt, because sometimes you could be at a deficit when it comes to your move and you're moving into a new role. We'll talk about this a little bit more in a little bit. And then education and training, getting upskilling or reskilling. What about your work endurance? If you, during the pandemic, you went to work at home and all of a sudden you're going back into the office, well, you may not be used to walking around, and those first couple of days could be, or first couple of weeks can be completely exhausting because you're not used to doing that, the long commute, all those type of things. Think about not only your mental and financial, but also your physical endurance is going to play a part in this also. And lastly, stage 6, you want to launch your plan. Transition gradually. And what I mean by that is if you have a current role, just don't resign and one day and then expect the next day that you're going to be in your new career. If at all possible, try to slowly or gradually move into your new career. If you need to take a series of career pivots, that's one way that I did it, was through a series of career pivots in order to get to where I'm fulfilled now in a position that I'm very happy with. Think about that. Network. We're always going to be talking about that. Take those calculated risks. Just don't jump, into that new position without making sure that you do your research. And then also take those small actions to keep moving it forward. Lastly, fine-tune your research, your resume, and your interview skills. What are some obstacles that some of us may run into? Facing ageism. And for those of you that really don't understand this, ageism is by law is illegal. The problem with it is we have to prove that we were a victim of ageism. And that's very, very difficult unless someone flat out said, you're too old for this. And in an interview, and that was the basis of their decision not to select you for that position. Generally speaking, 40 years, according to the law, 40 years and older is when the claim for ageism can be made. With that being said, some companies, they feel this way. They feel that stereotypes of people, people 40 and above you're too expensive, you're more unhealthy, et cetera, et cetera. This is a lot of hogwash, but this is very, very real in today's marketplace. We'll have to develop our self-esteem and tactics to be able to challenge this. And that really is up to you in how you address this. And we'll talk about that here in a little bit, about doing some things that will help in the fight against ageism. But moving past this, another fear is starting over. We talked about this. So you have to define that destination. Where are you going? And walking through the woods without a compass and a map is not a good thing. And the same thing applies here. You don't want your next steps to be a complete mystery. Some people are all about the risk and, wherever I land is wherever I land. I don't necessarily believe that that is the best way to go. You will have to be prepared to tell your story. Why are you making this change? And that is going to be up to you how you necessarily do that, whether that's through your elevator pitch, your 30-second introduction, professional introduction, or a more personable approach, how and why you're doing this. And then reintroduce yourself to your current network. Most people say, well, that's silly. Why would I do that? They already know who I am. Believe it or not, if you want people to take you seriously, you're going to have to convince them that what you're doing is for real. And if they are going to soon believe it, then those that you meet for the first time and those employers will then believe it also. Reintroduce yourself and broadcast your change to your current network. Find ways to demonstrate your ability so that when you are introduced to an employer, you'll be able to show how you've created value. And we talked about volunteering and doing some other things that will allow you to demonstrate your abilities. Find a mentor. This is so important because they can really provide that feedback. And it's a tough thing, and trying to go through it alone without having someone there that can help you through this process only makes it that much more difficult. Look for a mentor, someone that has either done a career change before or is a professional career counselor, career coach. If you are contemplating doing this, I would be happy to assist you in your career reinvention as well. Talk to friends and peers about your ideas. Keep them involved in the process. Upskilling and reskilling your outdated skills. I can't say this enough. Most people, they stop when they hear that they have to do some of these things. And to be truthful and honest, it's not easy. It really isn't. The most costly way is to go back to college or a trade school. There are some less costly ways to do that, talking about training courses and workshops, as well as e-learning and online courses. We're talking about Coursera, and LinkedIn Learning is another. If you have the premium, you can use LinkedIn Learning. All these things are lower cost. And you also have those free ways, webinars. YouTube is huge. I learn a lot of things that I didn't know, or it helps me develop skills that I already have. I just need to sharpen them up a little bit. Blogs and podcasts, books, and then of course, professional associations. Look, if you can surround yourself by individuals that are currently doing what you want to do or working in the industry that you want to work in, there's nothing more that you can do for yourself than surround yourself with people that are doing what you want to do. And that's where you're going to gain that knowledge. You're going to understand where those opportunities are, whether that's to upskill, reskill, or find those different opportunities. Upskilling, that's about taking your current skills that you have and just updating them. Reskilling, well, that's learning something completely new. And in some cases, that is a fear many people may have as well. Looking at things from the employer's point of view. Well, employers are kind of wondering, well, you've worked 10, 15 years in this job. Why all of a sudden are you now wanting to make a career move into this industry? What helps is using referrals. And referrals, I've talked about this in several Tuesday Talks before. Referrals is probably going to be the best way that you're going to get your foot into the door at a company, especially if you are a career changer. If someone is willing to refer you to a position and assuming that they have a good reputation with that organization or currently a current employee of that organization, then, and they're in good standing, the employer is going to be more likely to want to speak to you in an interview than if you're applying to the position coldly through the applicant tracking system. Understand referrals. Leverage your unique selling proposition, basically what makes you different than others. And this is where that self-reflection is really going to be key to developing your unique selling proposition. And then, of course, your resume must reflect your job aspirations, your skills for the future. If your skills are not matching what the requirements are, then that's going to be problematic. The employer is probably not going to even consider you if you haven't defined how your skills are going to make you successful and valuable to that organization. Highlight your transferable skills. Make sure you're using targeted activity on social media, just not posting anything you want on there, but actually targeted activity, whether that's reaching out to hiring managers, recruiters, making industry relevant posts, writing articles, blogs. Those things are going to be targeted activity on social media, not just posting on Instagram and all those kind of things. But and lastly, check the mirror. We talked about ageism. This really is something that you may need to, if you're looking at this from the point of view, well, I'm too old to do this, maybe a change in style, your suit, however you do that, whatever it might be, but you may want to take a good look at yourself and remember that people make a snap judgment based off your appearance. And that's really important. If they perceive you to be that person that's too old, then that's going to stick with them. Just keep that in mind. And then moving on to money matters, we talked about this, that transition gradually. If you're still employed, you want to keep that as long as possible because we're talking about your benefits and things of that nature, because you may have the gap in your benefits for 30, 60, 90 days, however long that organization is until you have benefits. Until that time, you're probably going to have to, for any appointments, if you have any special type of medication that may not be covered, you're going to have to pay for that out of pocket. Understand and prioritize your health monetarily. And then, of course, plan with the end in mind. Where do you want to be 5, 10 years, 15 years? If you want to retire at the age of 45 with $2 million in the bank, well, you're going to have to look at that and how you're going to do that. Know your worth. This comes into your salary research. If you're going to take a dramatic hit in your salary, then you're going to need to build that emergency fund and then stick with a career change budget as well leading up to that. Those are a lot of things to consider. Financial, many people, this is what stops people cold in their career transition or reinvention because they can't afford to do that. And that's a big thing. Also, modernizing your resume. And this is something, got a Tuesday talk on resumes and how to do this, but don't put references available upon request at the bottom of your resume. We don't do this any longer. That is an outdated practice. How about this? Use a modern email. What does this mean? If you've got AOL, Netscape, Yahoo, and even Hotmail, those are considered legacy email addresses. You may want to go get a Outlook or Gmail. That how this is tied, well, going back to being too old and ageism, people are going to make a snap judgment that maybe you're not technically savvy because you're working with AOL. And even though it is still active and it's still a very valuable email, people make that snap judgment. Leave off your street address. Nobody needs to know the exact address. Many different reasons for this. One, identity theft. Believe it or not, your resume has a lot of personal identifying information on it. And that coming into the wrong hands could be a security risk there. Also, the career objective used to be popular at one time. It's not so much anymore. Now, this has been an ongoing conflict in the employment world for a very, very long time. Best use a resume summary or a professional profile on your resume. Leave off the a word objective, period, and you'll do fine. But we don't use the career objective anymore. And then don't list every job that you've had in your entire lifetime. 10 to 15 years is depending on the level of the position. We want relevant experience, and you have to craft a resume, and sometimes it's going to expose gaps. But a lot of times how you format your resume will help in that, and I'll talk about that here in a few moments. And lastly, personal pronouns. I come across this many times when individuals have been in a career, their career for a long time, 10, 15, 20 years. And then they put their resume out and it has a lot of personal pronouns. Understand that most employers understand that your resume is about you. You don't have to put the word I in your resume. Keep that in mind. And then build a new network. You want to start with your current network and then connect with other career changers, expand your network, tell your story. Went back to that again. Tell your story, because if others are going to be willing to listen to you, you could get some very valuable feedback. Focus on the positives as well as be willing to help others in that interactive transition. And treat every interaction as a learning experience. What are the best practices? Here, run a reality check. What will it cost you in order to live the way that you want to? And then set those smarter goals. I talked about this in one of my first Tuesday talks, and I would encourage everyone to go take a look at that one. Address those inner fears, going back to the public speaking and those type of things. You have to address those in order to be able to commit to this change. Embrace the decision. You can't go into a reinvention half-stepping. It has to be full strides. Once you embrace that decision, you're going to have to go. Set those attainable job search goals. Obtainable job search goals. If you're planning on applying to 20, 30 positions every week, that's a little bit much, especially if there's not that many available on the market. If you set that as a goal and you're not reaching that, you may need to adjust that. They need to be obtainable. Rewrite the resume. As I talked about before, if you're using a chronological resume in a career change, it's probably not going to be the best type of format for you. Combination resume and functional resume. I know many people have heard the functional resume. Employers don't like it. I've found it to be very effective for career changers. It's something you may want to consider. But the combination resume by far is one of the best and one of the most suited for a career changer. You need to map and I've got a YouTube video on this as well, a Tuesday talk, format the resume, change your resume headline so that it conforms to the position that you're looking for. Focus on those transferable skills. Those are going to be so important. And communicate your skills and your abilities and your accomplishments in a language that a person is going to be able to understand. You're moving from one industry to another industry. If you're not speaking the same language, if you're using the terminology from your old industry, it's not going to go over very well. And then, of course, fill in the gaps by listing those internships and relevant volunteer work. If you have doubts about cover letters in the career change, you must have a cover letter. Briefly acknowledge the switch, the change, connect the dots and how your knowledge and abilities meets the requirements. If you're not doing that, if you just turn in a resume, the recruiter or the hiring manager that's looking at your resume may not understand why your experience doesn't necessarily meet what they want in someone. But if you can add a cover letter to that and kind of explain what your predicament is and why you're doing what you're doing and your passion for making that move, that might make the difference between being rejected or referred to the hiring manager, and could quite possibly get you an interview. And then incorporate those skills and responsibilities developed in the past. Those are still important, but we have to convey it in a language that they're going to understand, remember? And then, of course, express the passion and your knowledge for that particular position. Be proud of your accomplishments that you've done. They are still relevant, but you have to take those and convert those into something of value. Why is that employer going to seek value in what you've done in the past? Those are going to be huge benefits. Prepare for that job interview. Put yourself in the employer's shoes. Be able to explain why you're changing those careers, as well as how your experience translates to that new career. And then, of course, the question that they might be asking, how do we know that you really want this? Then you have to be able to tell that story about your passion for why you want to make that move. What do you bring to the table? This goes back to your value and how your past accomplishments will bring value. And then, of course, answer that big question, why now? Well, everybody has a different reason. We need to make sure that that reason is going to be convincing enough for that employer. And it really needs to be about the professional aspect of things, not necessarily about your personal circumstances, because that's not going to win the employer over. Keep it professional. And if you can define, and that's why telling your story to so many different people is going to be very, very important, because if you can now convince them, then the employer is going to be a little bit more open to that as well. Ways to grow your network, alumni, whether that's all the way back to high school. You'd be surprised about how many people that you probably went to high school with are in influential positions in other organizations. What about professional associations, current networks, social media, job fair, in-person and online networking events? These are very, very useful. And then lastly, some mistakes to avoid. If money is your sole motivation, you probably don't want that to be that could be problematic. There really needs to be something else. Think about, are you quitting the career instead of the job? Is it the change of environment, maybe a different job? Would that be something that helps rather than going through a complete career change? Definitely jumping into a new industry without doing your research, not involving others. You got to talk to your friends and your family. And then listening to others. If people are pushing you in a direction that you're uncomfortable with because they're saying, yeah, you need to do this. Yeah, you'd be great at doing that, but it's not where your interest lies, it may not be advisable to do that. And then lastly, getting frustrated. This can take a long, long time. But if you get frustrated and then quit in the middle, where's that going to leave you? All right. And then our key takeaways, be clear about whether a job change or a career change is right for you. Recognize the importance of the 6 stages of your career reinvention, and understand there's a lot of obstacles that you will face. And the career reinvention is unlike all those others where we talk about a job change and a career change. The reinvention is really about your change of your mindset and developing those positive, successful habits. And then lastly, integrate those best practices into your action plan to help you navigate those common obstacles. My information, feel free to connect with me. And if anyone has any questions, the floor is now open. I appreciate you guys. Thank you. Please make sure that you fill out the end of session survey. Thank you. Thank you, Deborah.